Montgomery forwards it around the boards to the right point. A shot, and it's in from the right point. Caeden Herrington, 1-0 Stars with 4:10 remaining in the first period.
You're listening to All the Kings Men.
Quick passing for Lincoln. Harrington at the left point. To the right point, finds Rombach. Rombach back to Harrington. One-time blast. He scores! Caeden Herrington, his first of the season.
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. I am Jesse Cohen. This is All the Kings Men. I had a few people reach out to me and wonder why there was no podcast week, so here's a little personal update, and apologies if you're not interested in this sort of thing. Last week, I completed my final scheduled infusion of chemotherapy. Both my parents flew out to be with me. There was a little ceremony at City of Hope where I have been receiving my treatments. It's been a year of intense personal change. So I just took a week for myself to not have any pressure, to deal with my parents, to host my parents, to see my parents, and to not think about anything I didn't have to. It was a long week. It was a lovely week. I want to thank everybody who has reached out to me and wished me well. I still have to have a full body scan to verify that the chemotherapy had the intended effect. Then I'll have to continue to get scanned routinely over the next few years, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, for now, everything looks like it's as positive as it could be hoped. I feel incredibly fortunate and blessed, and I want to say thank you again to everybody who has continued to root for me and send me messages. I've appreciated every single one of them. Now, having said all that, today we are here to talk about Caeden Herrington. He was drafted in the 4th round, 120th overall, and a few weeks ago I said on Twitter that the danger for me personally of doing these prospect episodes is that inevitably I wind up deciding that I am just totally irrationally all in on one of these picks every year, not having watched them play, not having followed their juniors career or collegiate career or whatever. And somehow it's almost always a defenseman taken in the 4th round. It's a weird coincidence. This year it's Herrington. People were asking me and I was reluctant to answer, but it's Caeden Herrington. This guy, this season, that's who it is. After talking to Rocky Russo, Mark Yannetti, Scott Wheeler, I'm just sold on this kid in a way I wasn't previously and I didn't expect. He goes on the list of Jacob Muvrari, Mikey Anderson, Jordan Spence, Angus Booth, all defensemen picked in the 4th round, all inexplicably guys that after hearing other people talk about them, that's it. I'm sold. And I have continued to love all those players and will probably continue to do so. Anyway, now you know my bias. So let's talk about Caeden Herrington. We're here today to talk about LA Kings draft pick Caeden Herrington, taken 120th overall in the 4th round. He played for the Lincoln Stars during the 2024-25 season, and joining us right now, head coach of the Lincoln Stars, Rocky Russo. How are you doing today, Rocky?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So I was just, before we spoke, I was re-listening to our conversations with Scott Wheeler and Mark Yannetti about Caeden Herrington. And I've known Mark long enough, and I've known how he operates long enough that I can sort of get excited based on what excites him. And one of the first things that I noticed about Caeden Herrington was I didn't have a ton of information about Caeden Herrington readily available to me. I just have like a process when I start, these sort of little research podcasts of like trying to find out as much about the player as I can. And my first step turned up nothing on Caeden Herrington. And I said that to Mark. I said, I got nothing. So why? What's going on? And then he started talking to me about Caeden Herrington, and I went, oh, this is a kid they're really excited about. Now he's a 4th round pick, so I mean nobody's expecting him to turn into Erik Karlsson, but he's an overage player. He's 6'2", north of 200 pounds. But the thing that stood out to me was the comment that he got better step by step, meticulously, every month, every game, every inch along the journey. He was committed to getting better and did get better. Does that sound like the player you're familiar with?
Yeah, it sounds like the process that we have for all of our players here in Lincoln, and we're committed to that 9 months of development from the time they get here in late August until our season is ending, hopefully in the middle of May. And Caeden's no exception to that. He came to us and he was exceptionally talented from an offensive perspective. He was clearly better than everybody when he was playing prep hockey. And so he got a taste of the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers late in the season the year before. We were able to trade for him on draft day last summer, and we brought him in here with big expectations. And he was essentially a rookie in junior hockey. And so for him to command the responsibility that he did from day one in regards to being a leader, being one of our captains, running a power play, playing top 4 minutes, and then recognizing where he needed to improve his game, just kind of shows you the level of maturity that young man has.
Let's drill down on the maturity issue. He went to prep school, which is not something that I'm familiar with. I didn't go to prep school. All I know, yeah, well, most people didn't, I think. But when I think of prep school, and this is my bias, I think of like, this is going to age me horribly, but I think of the sitcom Silver Spoons from, I don't know, decades and decades ago. I think of Richie Rich. I think of kids that don't need to work hard because, if you're already going to prep school, you don't need to work hard.
You're probably coming from a well-off family.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a little different now. I think that a lot of those prep schools are providing some scholarship opportunities for athletes and such. But at the end of the day, this is a scenario where that path was good for Caeden. He was able to have the puck on his stick a lot. He was able to make confident plays. He was able to recover when he made mistakes. And it did help him transition to the USHL. I wouldn't say seamlessly, because nobody, with the rare exception of the Macklin Celebrinis of the world, transition to the USHL seamlessly. Everybody has to take the hard road, and Caeden did that, but he produced all along that way as well. And we knew he had to improve the defensive side of his game and his gaps in the neutral zone and his post to corner defending and some of those things that he probably really didn't have to do at the prep level. But he recognized that. He was all for being coached. He wanted to be coached hard. He wanted to be held accountable. He wanted to watch the video. He wanted to do the extra reps. So when you get a player like that that's committed to working on the things in his game that aren't the best, that's when you really have a player that's fun to work with, because anybody that does something well wants to go replicate that. If you can pound a one-timer, it's real fun to stand there and hit one-timers, but you got to do the other things to round your game out. Caeden recognized that and he embraced it.
How is he with adversity? If he works on something and it doesn't go well, or if he has a rough night or a rough patch or a rough stretch, is he able to get over that and move on? Some people like failing, as weird as that might sound, because it gives them a clearer view of what they need to work on.
Caeden had stretches like every other player on our team where he went 4 or 5 games without a point, and most players start gripping the stick. He's no exception. The difference was we could talk about it. He was mature enough to sit in the office and we could talk about some things and say, hey, here's why you're not having success right now. These are the things that have changed in your game. Starting to cheat it a little bit offensively. You're trying to make some hope plays instead of making some quality plays. And so we would get him where he needed to be, focusing on the defensive side of the puck, breaking pucks out, retrieving pucks, and then allowing the offense to come to him. And as he did that, he would find his groove again. So he wasn't a guy that let adversity get to him. He was a guy, though, that could recognize when things weren't going well and then search for solutions.
He scored 16 goals as a defenseman in the USHL. I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment where that ranks, but it's fairly high. The Kings have a history of drafting good skating, puck-moving, offensive-minded, right-shot defensemen or acquiring them via trade, but they tend to be not 6'2", 205 pounds or whatever he is. How much of his offensive prowess comes from, speed and skill, and how much of it comes from blending speed and skill with size and tenacity and grit and all those other words?
I think that's a great way to put it. I think that when you have a defenseman like him with his frame, with his size, his skating ability, that can contribute offensively, you have a genuine threat. But for me, what impressed me the most about his offense was his ability to keep pucks moving. And so making that 5-foot play out of pressure on the power play that kept our possession, that allowed us to generate offensive chances, to hold on to a puck in a scrum during a retrieval and break it out and get the puck moving up the ice. Those were things that he had a knack for doing. And so, yes, the numbers pop. He led the league in power play goals for defensemen. He led the league in 5-on-5 goals for defensemen. but ultimately it was his ability to just keep the puck moving, to continue to give himself chances to create offense. And so pucks don't die on his stick. Pucks don't die in his corner. Pucks don't die when they come to him at the blue line. They advance to the next player. They keep possession going, and that's where the offense generally comes from.
He's moving on to college, or he's at least scheduled to move on to college next season. Things change at the last minute sometimes, but
I'd love to have him back. But
sure. But I mean, how easily a player is he to replace? Like how much does his departure hurt your club?
Just as much as the departure of the guys from the year before, the year before that. And I mean, we've been very fortunate. The year before that, I moved Adam Kleber on, who went and played on the World Junior team, played first pair for Minnesota Duluth, and he's probably going to be in a Sabre jersey by the end of the season this year. So when you're doing a good job of drafting, which our scouting staff and our general manager do, and you're doing a good job of developing your players, which our coaching staff does, you're going to lose really good hockey players. And there's a long line of those guys that have been through here, especially defensemen that have moved on to do great things. And we'll miss Caeden, most certainly. And you don't necessarily replace the 6'2" confident right defenseman that can create offense, but you find a way. And so, we that might take two players to replicate what he did from a statistical standpoint. But we'll do that. We'll develop some new guys. We like our group that we have coming back, but no, you're never going to replace. You're not going to pick up another Caeden Herrington and drop him in the lineup. We've been fortunate, whether it was Kleber, whether it was Boston Buckberger, Antonio Fernandez, Joe LeMay, the list goes on of really high-end defensemen that have been in here and produced. We managed to find a way to bring the next guy in. And Jacob Rombach's another one that's going on. He's a 07. He was drafted at the top of the second round going to the University of Minnesota. And, he's 6'6" and left-handed and can defend and compete. And he's mean. And so you got to find a way to replace that too. So we've got some challenges on our back end. We're going to miss Caeden, but he's ready for college hockey and he's going to step right into a big role at Vermont.
The World Junior Summer Showcase is happening right now. Caeden Herrington named to Team USA, and I haven't been paying rapt attention to the tournament, but I think he might be playing as we're recording this right now. I was sort of flittering through Twitter and couldn't quite get a handle on when the game was being played. But I mean, what is it that he, as a fourth round pick, where's the gap? I guess I'm looking for in. He's an overage player, so he wasn't drafted last year. He's coming out of the USHL, which is a hard league, but not the highest profile league, in the world of, junior hockey. And yet here he is making the team, getting in the lineup. He obviously impressed, all the scouts with the LA Kings. So like what is the disconnect that I'm not seeing in where he, a more traditional path and the path that he's on?
It's that prep option, and it happened with Brennan Ali. Brennan Ali went back and did his senior year at Avon and kind of dropped his draft stock. He ended up going in the 7th round. There was a lot of teams that were talking about taking Caeden in the 7th round last year, but there's question marks when you're playing at that level of prep. There's question marks. And so had Caeden played full-time in the USHL last year, maybe he's a 2nd round pick last year, and so now he comes in and the sample size is it's 1 year of USHL hockey. And so I think that's why you get a bargain with him in the 4th round. If he did 2 years in the USHL, and I'm biased, but I think the USHL, when it comes to the competitive nature of the league, is as good as it gets. But had he done 2 years in the USHL, you're probably talking about a 2nd round pick. And so I think the value that the Los Angeles Kings got, and credit to their scouting staff, and I deal with Teddy a lot and with Andy, those guys, they know what they're doing. They've worked around this league for a number of years, and they saw a guy that they can get that they believe can play in the National Hockey League in the 4th round. And that's going to be a big time payoff for them in a few years.
If you and I speak again 10 years from now and we're talking about Caeden Herrington, NHL player, What kind of player is Caeden Herrington, and how did he get there?
Caeden Herrington did 2, maybe 3 years of college hockey, probably did another year or even 2 in the American Hockey League, and then finds his way to the National Hockey League. Cracks the lineup, continues to work, passes guys, finds his way onto the second power play, probably hit one-timers, and generates 5-on-5 offense, corrects some of the defensive deficiencies that he had in junior hockey and probably early on in college hockey, and becomes a well-rounded second pair right defenseman.
Excellent. Rocky Russo, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck on the upcoming season.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it.
The next player we're going to talk about is drafted in the 4th round, 120th overall, Caeden Herrington. And Mark, when I do the prep for these episodes, first thing I do is I go to hockeywriters.com and I look for their player profile for all the draft eligible players. And for whatever reason, Caeden Herrington doesn't have one. And when we were talking to Scott Wheeler, he talked about, that most teams only go so deep on their draft list. He said, most teams don't have 200 and something guys drafted or ranked, excuse me. So the first question I have about Caeden Herrington is why is he the first name on my list where I start having to go to my secondary and tertiary sources to start learning about this player?
Well, he comes from prep school. He didn't have a great draft year. He had a good draft year. He's a beautiful skater. I would think that his skating and size would get him on a draft list. But we also knew that he was kind of under the radar. Some kids just some kids slip through. He certainly didn't slip through for Teddy and Andy, especially after the Fall Classic. I said, Andy and I watched him last year, and he was fine. He was okay. Terrible defensively. But he's a young kid playing in prep school and didn't have to do some of those things. Going to the USHL can make or break a kid like that. It could have easily gone the other way for him. I mean, the USHL is a crazy hard league. I would argue the USHL is a harder league to play in than the CHL. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's harder to play in just because the pace and the runaround frenetic style and some of the older players make it a little harder to play in. And he just adjusted, and he just kept adjusting slowly. He just took baby step after baby step after baby step. He leaned on his skating, which is a defining element. I'm not sure if I'd call it elite, but it's a defined trait. It's certainly upper level. His rush-based game is good. He's a smooth skater, but he also has power. He's got some glide in his stride. His agility's good. He's 6'2" plus. But he wasn't a heavy kid. So he was one of those younger kids that kind of probably flew under the radar that way. He had a ton of goals in the USHL, but he wasn't one of the leading scorers. I think he played on that team with Rombach. So while he's probably getting seen, no one's really focusing on him because you're going to watch the other kid. So those would be my guesses. But as I said, they're guesses because by the middle of January, I was sick of hearing Andy and Teddy. I went in to watch this kid with Teddy, and he had his worst game of the year, which tends to happen with me. But what Teddy liked and what Andy liked were there. So even though he had his worst game, I saw with the tools they were talking about. Then I went back 2 more times with Andy, and he was, much closer to the player they said he was. He was certainly higher on our list than 200. I don't know. I said I didn't think he would be up on lists, but we wouldn't have wanted to wait a whole lot longer to get him. Maybe we wouldn't have had to, but as I said, this is a guy that evoked an emotional reaction from the 2 area guys. And then when I go in and have no emotion, and I'm just mercenary about it, I'm seeing what they see. And then Chris Byrne goes in, or Ron Payette or Nick Sinclair goes in and sees him, and they have a same non-emotional response to his tools. It becomes an easy guy. As I said, by the end of our process, all the guys on our staff wanted to draft this kid. Like the guys who weren't exposed to him early, but were exposed to him a little bit later through other means, kept coming back, would kept going, hey, Yank, I just watched the Herrington kid. Where's he on the list? Like there were other guys at the end who started becoming emotional about him. So he was a very easy pick for us. I'm surprised he would be that much under the radar with his tools and his size. I was happy to see that he did excellent in development camp. As I said, it's strictly a camp. Don't evaluate guys there. But in saying that, he did pretty good. So, and now he's going to the U.S. camp for the World Junior team. That'll be another step. As I said, it's weird how some guys fly under the radar. I mean, it happens. There are other teams pick guys that I'm like, I don't know. He's just one of those guys, I guess.
Of the guys who we picked, who was at development camp, that's maybe the one he catches your eye. It's like he has good size, good skater, led the USHL in goals among defensemen. He just kind of stands out, but all of those things are kind of on the offensive end. You talk about the defense. He almost feels like the perfect Kings developmental prospect when you look at the Kings maybe track record of adding defense to guys who have the other tools, right? Like, does that factor in a little bit?
100% that factors in. I hear people touting our draft record and stuff like that. On the defensive side, since we're talking about that, having Green and O'Donnell there, again, look at the steps Woolley's made in a year. That's on Jared, but it's also on Green and O'Donnell. I mean, there's a partnership there. If Jared doesn't do the work, Green and OD can only do so much. And if Green and OD don't do the work, Jared can only do so much. So when you have a partnership of, I've watched Greener and I've watched OD teach, and they're elite at teaching some of those defensive, some of those subtle things, some of those positional things, some of those things that only a big defenseman they were big defensemen, but they were good defensemen. People forget that, they forget how good the two of those were. So they can teach in a myriad of ways, so of course, seeing that Harrington's biggest weakness is his defensive. And again, last year it went a long way. I would say that he entered the USHL as a below average defender. I would say he approached average by the end of December. And in more games, I said still has to be better, but in more games than not, he was better than average by the end of the year. So he still needs to improve that consistency. But when you can hand him off to those two guys, they've already shown what they can do. As I said, it looks like it's a perfect match.
Just one real quick thought about O'Donnell and Green, and then Zach can ask another question about Herrington. You mentioned that they were not only big defensemen, but good defensemen. Both of them are also really, really smart. Mm-hmm. And I think they're kind of, they don't like to show it off. Let's just put it that way. But if you talk to them for more than 60 seconds, you start to see oh, these guys are really smart. They're really good communicators. They're really thoughtful. They're really smart. and I don't think either one of them, like I said, wants to show off about it.
I don't know. I mean, as I said, they're both, and again, they're both leaders too. And there's a humbleness that goes with being the type of leader that they were. As I said, everything you said about them is true. I mean, you get credit for, a guy making it, but you don't see the steps that were taken in the 5 to 6 years from draft to them making it. You don't always see that steps in the underlying work. I mean, and again, what people are seeing at development camp, that's the tip of the Titanic iceberg. There's so much other stuff underneath, and it's the other guys too. I mean, Stoll does it, Mike Donnelly does. I mean, with the forwards, but as I said, it certainly helps us drafting, knowing that the deficiency that Herrington has is the deficiency that they fix extremely well.
Not a ton of dudes who were drafted are going to Vermont. A lot of guys going to Denver. Is that maybe an opportunity for a guy who will be a freshman to play a role, get some opportunities there against hockey's competition, which is still pretty good, that he might not have gotten somewhere else? Is that maybe kind of the trade-off there?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's obviously harder to break into Denver's lineup or Michigan State's lineup or BU's lineup or Western Michigan. It's hard to an older lineup like Western Michigan. It's obviously harder to break in there. So going to Vermont, you would hope that he gets an earlier opportunity and a bigger opportunity. Um, but then there's also the support at those other places. Like, you know, if you're in Denver, you got a you got 15 guys as good or better than you supporting you and doing the heavy work. When things go wrong, they ain't going wrong for just one or two people. They're going wrong for 15 people, and those guys collectively can pull you out of a hard situation. So there's positives and negatives to it. I had a long talk with Teddy about it because I was concerned initially. I won't lie. Um, you don't want a guy to get because he's gonna, you look at him and you think he's gonna play big minutes in big situations. He's gonna be playing against BC, against BU, against Maine, among other teams. And those are hard matchups to take as a freshman when you're on a good team. But then again, you're balanced the type of kid he is, the type of work he's getting now, the type of support he has with the coaching staff there, and they've been dealing with it. And how do you improve? Well, you improve by getting those type of players in early and having them excel, which brings other guys in. So, there's as I said, you can find a positive and a negative to all of it. I think he's the type of kid who can handle that stress, that workload, that onus. I do like the coaching staff there. I do like the situation he's going into, so that puts us more at ease. And as I said, we have access to, you have a lot of access with Green and Stoll, and then again with Teddy and Andy, and again even Manon. Like she's in there all the time with these kids. She's a these kids they find it easy to talk to her. They find it easy to, they lose some of their guard. So it helps them talk through situations with her when other times they might go alone. So there's a pretty good support system between not only Vermont, but LA that gives me more confidence.
Next pick we're going to talk about, taken in the 4th round, 120th overall, Caeden Herrington. Scott, I have very little on Caeden Herrington, so I'm going to defer almost exclusively to your take on Caeden Herrington. You mentioned him earlier when we were talking about some other players.
Yeah, Herrington, a second overager from their class, obviously turned 19 in the middle of last season, so spent the first half of the season with the Lincoln Stars as an 18-year-old and the second half as a 19-year-old. Good-sized defenseman, another player, and this is a bit of a theme when we've talked about Burstevich and Christian Epperson, another player who looks like a pro in terms of the physical makeup. I believe he's 6'2", 6'2 and a half, somewhere in there. He's already over 200 pounds, I believe. Looks like an athlete, skates like an athlete, and really took a big step in the USHL this year to emerge as one of the better defensemen at that level and put himself firmly in the conversation to get drafted. Herrington was going to be a draft pick in that sort of middle range, that round 4 or 5 range of this year's draft, regardless of whether the Kings took him. So it's not as though they reached on another overager to get him where they got him. Scored a ton last year, has a heavy shot. Some of that just comes from that sort of man strength that I talked about. He likes to lean into it from the point. That's the primary driver of his offense as a right shot defenseman. He's not a super playmaker type or a high hockey IQ type who just sees it at a super advanced level. But he plays a firm, confident, aggressive style offensively and defensively. He finishes his checks. He defends hard. He defends firmly. And then offensively, he likes to attack off the line and join the rush and use that shot of his. So took a big step, kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. Epperson had played at the NTDP and had been talked about prospect. He was committed to Michigan before he was committed to Denver, and I believe Epperson scored if I recall correctly, Epperson scored a hat trick in his first game at the NTDP, and there had just been, his name had been out there in a way even as a draft eligible in his first year of eligibility. Harrington didn't have that. It's been a bit of a slower burn for Harrington, but then he emerged as a 6'2" righty who could skate and scored, I think, 15 plus goals for Lincoln in the USHL last season. And suddenly the conversation kind of changes, and he's a part of the Chipotle All-American game, and I thought he played well at the Chipotle All-American game, and sort of just you build from there. And now he's a project that you work with and that you keep an eye on, and that's what just about every fourth round pick is.
So I'm going to jump in, Zach. As somebody who insisted on referring to the pond as the Arrowhead Pond of Anaheim, I really appreciate the commitment to the Chipotle, all of that, to the sponsor naming.
A bit of a tick for me, because for so many years it was the BioSteel All-American game.
Oh, there you go.
Now I can't just call it the All-American game. I feel like if I called it BioSteel, I have to call it Chipotle.
I appreciate it.
I feel like now I'm going to abandon the salad I brought for lunch and go get Chipotle, because now I'm craving it after just hearing it a couple times.
Listen, that's why the sponsors pay their money, so that people like us will say their name.
Truth. Scott, when you mentioned Herrington earlier, I believe it was in the context of sometimes it's not, the 18-year-old first-round pick who stands out at an early development camp. It's the overage player. And I noticed a lot of the things that you said, just seeing him on the ice for the first time. The word you used was kind of confident, and he seemed like a guy who was confident, in playing his game. I'm wondering, when you see a guy like that who takes a big step in the USHL, how much stock do you kind of put into like a guy who's 19 in the USHL, which is maybe a lower caliber league, when you're evaluating him, because he's probably playing against some of the lower end competition as opposed to like a Chihar who's playing against, older grown men?
Yeah, it's a balancing act in terms of measuring all of the leagues. I wouldn't qualify though the USHL as a lower end league. I think the USHL is actually harder to score in and harder to be productive in than its contemporaries north of the border in the OHL, the QMJHL, and the WHL. The Western Conference in particular in the USHL plays really hard, plays almost like a pro style game, just in terms of it exists a little bit in the mud. It's a little grimy. It's tough to get inside ice and to score. The goaltending in the USHL is pretty consistently strong. So anytime a player produces as an 18 or 19 or 17 or 18 or 19-year-old, for example, in the USHL, I am actually more impressed by it, because you don't have kids at that level that are producing 130 points in a season at forward, and you don't have defensemen at that level who are producing 70, 80, 90 points like we've seen Zane Perek and Sam Dickinson and so many over the years do in the CHL. I think you have to understand production within that, and when a defenseman scores 15 plus goals at any level, it catches your attention. When that defenseman is 6'2" and 200 pounds, it catches your attention. When they're a righty, it catches your attention. So I think there were just enough things stacked on top of each other for Herrington that he became relevant, that he became interesting to teams, that he became someone that they felt they could project forward. Increasingly, teams aren't worried about having the supernatural playmaking types. There are only 2 power play jobs in the NHL nowadays for defensemen. What everybody really wants is the big guys who play firm, who play quickly, and that's Herrington. He doesn't sit over the puck all game long. He doesn't. He's not sort of waiting to make the next play. He just sees the next play and he makes the next play. It's a little bit on instinct. A little bit too much on instinct at times, but that's his identity. And when you have an identity as a young player, that can go a long way, because there's a lot of these kids who just, you're not sure what they could be at the next level. I think with Herrington, you project him as a part of your AHL depth. And then if he can climb through the AHL and be something more than that, then that's a bonus. If he can become a 6 to 8D for you, or even a number 9D for you, who's an AHL call-up option, every organization needs those guys, and it certainly helps when they're big and strong and can move.
Scott, I think a lot of conversations that could have taken place about who goes to which organization maybe don't happen. Like if the wrong player goes to the wrong team, that could really be an extra hurdle in their path. We've just spent the last 8 seasons with one general manager who, by the end of that 8 years, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on what he prioritized, what he liked, how he liked to operate. We're a few months into a brand new general manager. I have no idea yet what he likes, what he prioritizes, how he likes to operate. When you're evaluating a draft pick, do you have time to even look at that sort of thing? Or is it just, are there too many teams, too complex an equation to worry about?
No, there are trends that reveal themselves all the time in this work, team to team. The Carolina Hurricanes, I could tell you exactly what their type is. The Detroit Red Wings, I could tell you exactly what their type is. The Toronto Maple Leafs, previously under Wes Clark and Kyle Dubas, I could have told you what that type is, and now under Brad Treliving, I could tell you what his type is. So there are certain organizations where it's more telegraphed. There are other the Ottawa Senators for a long, long time, and even still after a general manager change there to Steve Staios from Pierre Dorion, for a long, long time, the Ottawa Senators and their staff had a very clear type of player that they were after. But there are also organizations that sort of play in the margins a little bit. They take different types. They don't rule guys out. I thought one of the brilliant things that the Dallas Stars under Jim Nill have done over the last decade plus is find players of all different shapes and sizes, and maybe not necessarily being married to one identity or the belief that all 12 forwards need to look the same or all 6 defensemen need to look the same. And that's the way I try to do my job personally. I try not to rule guys out. Logan Stankoven maybe doesn't play for the Dallas Stars anymore, but Logan Stankoven helped them get Mikko Rantanen. And Jason Robertson, there are rumors about where Jason Robertson fits in the mold for the Stars moving forward. But Jason Robertson was a 100-point man who was a second-round pick because they believed that he didn't have to be a power forward necessarily as a 6'3" winger, and that he could maybe play a little bit differently than what you maybe expect a 6'3" winger to play like. And that's, I think, a very successful way to go about the draft. I know it didn't necessarily work out for Arthur Kaliev, but I respected when the Los Angeles Kings took Artie and took a chance on Artie because he was maybe a little bit different and offered something a little bit different. Brant Clark certainly looks very different and unique in the way he skates, less now than he used to, but in minor hockey and into junior hockey, Brant Clark was a very unique looking player who wasn't for everybody, and the Kings trusted in their team and in their coaching staff to develop him properly and to get him across the finish line. And it's been a bit of a process for Brant, but he's getting there now. And I expect that Brant's going to continue to take big steps. And so I'm all about not ruling guys out, not being too rigid in what you're looking for, and being open to just finding different players at different ranges in the draft that make sense at that time.
Last one I had on Herrington is you don't see a ton of drafted prospects committed to the University of Vermont. You see them going more to different schools. He's a Vermont native. Wondering, maybe, is there a balance between, like, they're not known necessarily for having or drafting and developing those kinds of players, but also you'd have to imagine there's probably more opportunity for a player to play maybe more minutes, higher role when going to a school like that. Just kind of wondering your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think as we move into this new era of college hockey recruiting, and increasingly the bigger schools are after the bigger names out of the CHL, and it becomes even more of a crowd in terms of power play opportunities and minute opportunities at places like Michigan State and Michigan and Boston College and BU and Minnesota, and all of a sudden Penn State, who've come out of nowhere here over the last couple of years to become a legit contender in the Big Ten. As that happens, I think kids will actually benefit from considering some of the smaller schools that maybe have less of a track record producing NHL prospects in the last decade, because those opportunities will be available at those schools in ways that they aren't available at the Boston schools or the Minnesota schools or the Michigan schools. So that part of it, I think, is interesting. I just like I just said, you shouldn't rule out kids for the way they look or being a little bit different. I think there are different paths for everybody, and there are still kids coming out of sort of non-big programs, if you will. And Vermont fits that bill to a T. Not that long ago, we were talking about Penn State not being a relevant program to produce NHL players, and Western Michigan, who won the national title last year, not being a relevant program to produce players. If you've got a good coaching staff, if you've got opportunity to develop there, you should take that. There's benefit in a player like Herrington being closer to home and closer to family, and all of those things matter. So, and help a kid sort of move along through a very, very big chapter in their life that comes with all sorts of pressures. So I love a player like Herrington staying at home and sort of following that path and trusting that he'll come out of it on the other side of it.